Welcome and thanks for joining me today. This will be the first video in a series dedicated to supporting practices who have recently created a Sympliact account and who are ready to configure the app to function as they desire. So, you've created an account, now what? We're currently on the dashboard, and we'll start by navigating to the admin settings section. I'll click on the profile button at the top right of the screen and enter the admin section. The initial page that we land on is the practice profile, and that's where we'll start this first video. The first section within the practice profile is practice information. Within this section, I can add and edit a practice name, any practice or organization level NPI numbers that I desire to add, and I can select my practice's specialty or specialties. Additionally, in this section, I can add a logo, which we've already done here. I can click the Add Logo button, select an image file of my desire, and click Open or Add. But we've already done that here. And that logo will be used on email notifications sent to patients to add branding for the particular practice to those patient communications. The next section on this screen that we'll review is the Business Associate Agreement. The agreement is outlined here for your review. Sympliact serves as a business associate to you as a covered entity under HIPAA. As such, this contract outlines our responsibilities as a business associate to protect your patient's data in compliance with HIPAA, and also your responsibilities to use the platform in compliance with HIPAA. The contract can be executed by entering information for your practice's privacy officer here, and subsequently signing in this signature box and clicking Submit. The next section that we'll look at on this screen is a section that allows for adding and editing locations. If I elect to add a location, I hit the plus button. I can enter a location name, address, email, website, phone, and fax number. I would then click Save, and that will add that location to my practice. And practices can be edited if something were to change about that location. And then if you have more than one location can be selected as your primary location. Next, we will look at configuring your Notices of Privacy Practices, or NOPP. Using this functionality can be toggled on here. And when toggled on, you'll be asked for some information about your practice. If I click Edit, we can see that we are asked for practice name or covered entity name, website, address, and privacy officer information. We also have the ability to add one or more additional considerations if you would like to add some specific content to your NOPP over and above the default content provided. You can review this prior to accepting it. The default content is the content provided by the Federal Health and Human Services Department and covers all needed information for a legitimate NOPP. I can close this, and then once I've entered my information, any additional considerations I like, I can approve it here. When I approve it, which I've already done previously, it shows that we've got an NOPP approved on this date and time. If you ever needed to update this information, you can always edit, approve, and a new NOPP will be approved at this new time, and these versions will be tracked by the system. So if a patient has reviewed and approved a prior NOPP and the NOPP gets updated, when that patient comes back for treatment and it's indicated, the patient will be presented the new NOPP to review any changes or edits. If we view our NOPP that we currently have approved, we see our practice's information. And then at the bottom of the default content, we see any additional considerations that we may have wanted to add to the default content. Next, we'll look at the last section of the practice profile configuration screen, and that's the authorization section. It's very similar to the NOPP section. I can toggle this on or off depending on whether or not I want to use this feature. And within the authorization section, I can click Edit, and add as many different authorizations as I want. For example, here we see an authorization that involves fee and payment authorizations, as well as one that involves consent to treat or treatment authorizations. I can approve those authorizations, and similar to the NOPP, I see confirmation that authorizations have been approved this date and this time. Similarly to the NOPP as well, I can edit those at any future date. If I need to edit current authorization, add a new authorization, that can be done, and this will get updated to show when the newest version of the authorizations have been approved. Similarly, on the patient side, if the patient has signed off on prior authorizations but there's been change, the system tracks the versions automatically, and the system will know if the patient needs to review updated or new authorizations, and this can be done seamlessly on the patient side without any need for interaction on the practice side. It will be automated by the platform. So now let's jump over to the patient side to see how that NOPP and authorizations functionality works on the patient side once we've configured it. So this is a patient that I added to Southern Oral Surgery on the practice side, and on the patient side we see a connection request for that patient. The patient can review this information and can elect to connect to Southern Oral Surgery. Upon doing so, the patient will be then routed to those authorizations that we just configured. Those authorizations can be reviewed and agreed to. That notice of privacy practices can be reviewed as well for Southern Oral Surgery, in addition to any additional considerations we've added. And the patient can also add any individuals that they desire to have access to their records. This can be accepted, signed off on, and finished. Upon doing so, I'll jump back over to the practice side. Let's go to the dashboard, search for that patient in question, and at the bottom here I now have confirmation that the patient has reviewed the authorizations. I can review the signature and the time stamp on when those authorizations were approved. I can see any release of information or record privileges, and I can also see that they executed the NOPP. As discussed previously, these authorizations in NOPP are versioned, so what that means is if this becomes out of date, I'll have a message here that shows that this is no longer satisfied, the patient has not reviewed the most recent version of the NOPP, or it's been over a year since they've reviewed authorizations in NOPP, they're back for additional care, and they need to re-review those on the patient side during the normal registration process. Okay, thanks again for joining me for this video. This concludes the first video on practice configuration, going over the practice profile screen. We'd be happy to help with any additional information needed or diving deeper into any of these sections. Feel free to reach out at any time. Otherwise, video 2 will focus on user management. Thanks.